Musical theater is one of the most fascinating forms of storytelling. The idea of using songs to progress a narrative, and the way that music and its elements can be used to enhance the story, is absolutely fascinating to me. So, yes, I like musicals. There, I said it. I know, this is probably not what you expect to hear from a person that brands herself around mystery content, but here we are. And for the next insert runtime here, I'm going to take you through the history of what I genuinely believe is one of the best musicals ever written, and overanalyze every single element of the concept album. So, sit back, grab your popcorn and playbills, and welcome to Analyzing Epic, the musical masterpiece you've never seen. Epic the Musical is based on the classic Greek, epic, Homer's Odyssey. It's the story of a man named Odysseus and his long and arduous journey to return home after the Trojan War. Epic the Musical is an adaptation of this story, created by Jorge Rivera-Herrans, and you will have never seen it performed because, you can't. It's currently in the process of releasing its concept album. And yet, it's managed to garner a passionate fan base, high praise, and more, all without even being fully released. And I'm going to do my best to explain to you why. In order to talk about this show, we have to talk about the man behind it. This is going to be a very long video, so if you'd like to skip to certain sections, timestamps for each chapter will be included in the description. But this topic is genuinely one of my greatest passions, and I intend to leave no stone unturned, because this story and project deserves to be documented. So, without further ado, let's begin with Chapter 1, The History Saga. Jorge Rivera-Herrans was born on February 6, 1998, and raised in Dorado, Puerto Rico. As long as he knew, he was going to be a doctor. It was never something he really questioned, and everyone around him seemed to believe the same thing. Jorge was president of the Medical Youth Club in high school, and over 3 summers, he had spent over 200 hours shadowing surgeons. This was clearly a serious career path for him, and that extended into his college career. Jorge went to college at the University of Notre Dame as a science business major. He was on the pre-med route, and everything seemed set in stone. However, he would end up auditioning for a musical theater production of Grease, being cast as Duty. This was not Jorge's first experience in theater, as he had acted in a few high school shows, but it did lead to this realization. It became so apparent because I would get very excited for rehearsals, and then I would go back to my pre-med homework and hate it, he said. I had found something I really liked and felt I was good at, and my morale for my science work just kept decreasing. And so, in his second semester, Jorge made a choice that would drastically alter the course of his life. He switched his major to film, television, and theater. This led to some fallout with his family, particularly his dad. He didn't tell them until a few weeks after the major was changed, and according to him, quote, "They were shocked, and it was rough for a while. My father and I especially, we were butting heads and arguing, but everyone was questioning me about it, even my high school teachers. It felt like I had made a choice, and the entire world wasn't happy with my choice." And yeah, how do you cope with that? How do you handle knowing that what makes you happy, everyone around you doesn't approve of? It's a truly isolating, crushing feeling, and for Jorge, the solution was composing. Specifically, a musical. And sophomore year, in his performance techniques class, students had to perform a song from a musical of their choice, and Jorge decided to perform one from his. As a result, his professor, Matt Hawkins, pulled him aside afterward and said, quote, "If all of the songs in your musical are like that, I want to see if we can make it happen here." This musical would be titled Stupid Humans. It's a semi-autobiographical show about a character named Indigo, who switches from pursuing a career in medicine to, you guessed it, music. Over the course of his college career, Jorge continued to participate in theater. He played the leads in both Spring Awakening and In the Heights, as he continued to work with Hawkins on Stupid Humans. Thanks to Hawkins pitching it to the faculty, Stupid Humans was chosen to be premiered at the university. And on February 21st, 2019, the show opened at the Regis Philbin Studio Theater, with Jorge playing the lead character of Indigo. However, the show's original run from February 21st to March 3rd was not the end for the musical. Jorge was awarded a grant which allowed him to continue working on the production, specifically in collaboration with Chicago's Goodman Theater. Unfortunately, the pandemic struck, but they were still able to work around restrictions and revamp the show. 2 acts were condensed into one for a total runtime of an hour and a half, similar to musicals like Jesus Christ Superstar or Six. Characters, scenes, and songs were added and cut. And when all was said and done, the show was renamed from Stupid Humans to its current title, My Heart Says Go.
Okay, I lied. I hate this job. I really freaking hate this job. And there's no one on the mother-loving face of the planet to make me say thanks for this job. Only reason I have this job, Father told me to get this job. Demanded a land, a solitary in life, and med school to be granted monetary advancement.
I have to ask, why don't more people know about this show? It's not that I expect them to. What confuses me is why Jorge never seems to really talk about it anymore. Perhaps because it's so tonally different to Epic, and I do think he's really improved as a creator since, but I also don't think My Heart Says Go is bad by any means either. I won't act like Goodnight Indigo didn't gut me a little bit. Regardless, with the success of his first show, it seems that Jorge decided he was not stopping there, because on January 16th, 2021, a video was uploaded to his TikTok that would change everything. Chapter 2. The TikTok Saga.
I'm writing a musical about the Odyssey, and this is how it goes. There once was a man, cunning man running through the sky and the sand, in the land of gods and monsters, sought to see his family prosper and ending in our car stand. Through the process he became dauntless, now he's remembered forever for his endeavors, and all he ever lived was the life of a legend, a life that was epic. 600 men under my command, with only one goal in mind. Make it back alive to our homeland. 600 men, 600 miles of open sea. But the problem's not the distance, it's what lies in between.
This is the first TikTok video Jorge posted that reveals his idea for a new musical based on the Greek poem, The Odyssey. It was originally a senior thesis, which he said aimed to create a musical that emulates the sense of progression one gets from watching anime or playing a video game. Both of these things are heavy inspirations for Epic, as we will later see. While working on the show, Jorge decided to start posting his progress to TikTok, which is still a primary method of updating the community to this day. Most of these TikToks are also posted to his YouTube channel as well, if you want to watch them there. Now, listening to this early version of the opening number, I'm sure there's one show that comes to mind that it sounds really similar to.
Past patiently waiting and passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow.
Yeah, it's undeniable that the musical style of both My Heart Says Go and early drafts of Epic are very similar to the fast-paced raps of Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton. Or just his work in general, honestly. Both composers also have a habit of playing the leads in their own shows, but at least Jorge has the pipes for it. For legal reasons, that was a joke. I love Lin, I swear. But regardless, my point in bringing this up is that this
To see his family prosper and ending in our car stand. Through the process he became dauntless.
is not what Epic would become. It would very much form its own musical identity, and I think it's stronger for it. But we have to start somewhere, so let me take you through the most concrete record of Epic's development, Jorge's TikTok account. His early videos detail snippets of some of the songs. It's so fascinating seeing these early demos, now knowing what the final songs sound like. I also want to highlight a couple of these silly little fun videos he made, because this is a habit Jorge has not lost over the years.
Mr. Squirrel, Mr. Squirrel. Mr. Squirrel, Mr. Squirrel.
Another TikTok-related thing that I found really cool is that Jorge has collaborated with another artist named Jemaya. She makes music about Greek mythology, and Jorge appeared in the music video for her song, Gladiators. And the reason that I bring this up is because I'm a huge fan of the reality TV show Survivor, in which Jemaya was actually a contestant on season 45. So when I saw her appear in one of his TikToks, it was like some surreal crossover episode of my interests, and it's a fun bit of trivia that I wanted to include. Anyway, Jorge's videos would also go into how the songs are made, usually in terms of the instrumentation, and what certain sounds signify in the show. For example, mortals are represented with more traditional orchestral instruments, while the gods have electric-sounding ones. I'll be delving into more of these musical motifs in each specific song, but these TikToks are a source for a lot of my information, and the way Jorge explains and talks about it is so endearing given his clear passion for the subject. I highly recommend you give his page a watch if this sort of thing interests you. His enthusiasm about it is truly infectious. Since this is a musical, one needs, well, singers. Some of the cast are people he knew from college, such as Tegan Early as Athena, but there were still many roles that needed to be filled. And the way Jorge went about this was actually by posting open casting calls on his TikTok account, promising that, yes, anyone can audition. This is such a great way to open the project to the community and to get more eyes on the show. And the talent that he's managed to recruit is nothing short of astounding. This is proof that you don't need celebrities and big-name actors to make your show a success. You just need the right passion and talent, and everyone in the Epic cast is brimming with both. The last main genre of TikToks were progress updates. These were short little videos where Jorge describes what stage he was at in the songwriting process of Epic. And in order to fully contextualize this, I'd like to briefly explain the general structure of the show. Epic is a fully sung-through musical, similar to shows like Les Mis or the aforementioned Hamilton. This means that there is no spoken dialogue in the show between songs. They just go from number to number all the way from start to finish. Epic is also broken up into 9 sagas. As stated previously, Jorge is a huge anime fan, so these sagas are somewhat meant to emulate the ones you'd find in things like Dragon Ball, for example. Epic's 40-song tracklist is divided as such. Act 1 consists of the Troy Saga, the Cyclops Saga, the Ocean Saga, the Circe Saga, and the Underworld Saga. Act 2 has the Thunder Saga, the Wisdom Saga, the Vengeance Saga, and the Ithaca Saga. These sorts of updates were posted pretty consistently, the hype and anticipation growing, until finally, on Christmas Day, 2022, the first concept album for the musical was released.
Finally happening.
It's 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 happening.
After all this time, it's finally happening.
And this brings us to, well, me. A couple weeks later, on January 16th, 2023. Around this time, there was a trend going around on TikTok featuring a snippet from a very catchy song.
Nice try, but two can play this game.
Nah, don't be modest. I know you're a goddess, so let's be honest. You are Athena. Badass in the arena.
Curious, I did some digging and found out that it was from a musical. Now, I was a little cautious taking musical recommendations from TikTok, especially after the last time that one went viral on there. But I decided, okay, there's only 5 songs out right now, about 15 minutes. I'll give it a shot. And nothing was ever the same. With all the backstory established now, it's finally time to talk about the songs themselves. I'll be covering each of the first 5 sagas in order, going over the songs one by one. This is also where I drop any semblance of being an objective narrator. Don't worry, I will still talk about the development and details of these songs, but I can't not bring my opinions and thoughts on them into the discussion either. As such, I introduce you to the Barbie Rampa Epic the Musical Ranking, or, as I like to call it, the Betmer. I will be placing every song somewhere on this list as we go through them. Okay, editor's note, I tried to do this. I really did, but the more I wrote this script and the more I agonized over it, I realized that there is genuinely no way I can rank these songs. And this is coming from someone who usually does not have this problem. I don't think Epic has a single bad song, and I appreciate different elements of each to the point where I've decided to just cut the Betmer from the video. I'm keeping the tangent in, though, to emphasize how insane I am about this show, because even if I left the list in, it would probably change within a week of me posting this. Okay, now back to the script. As we go through the songs, some of them will have visual accompaniment from artists who gave me permission to use their animatics in this video. Everyone who let me use their stuff is linked in the description, and I implore you to check them out. They're insanely talented. Seriously, if you look up Epic the Musical at all on YouTube, you'll find a slew of amazing animatics that bring the show to life, and you should absolutely go watch them. One of my favorite parts of any saga release is that we can expect a new wave of animatics to follow soon after. It's just one of the many examples of the passion of the Epic community. Supplemental visuals will also be provided by Jorge's official live stream of the show. Alright, let's take a deep breath as the curtain rises with Chapter 3, The Troy Saga. The original release of the Troy Saga consisted of 5 songs, with a runtime of 16 minutes. And I say original release because it is relevant. You see, there's an important event in the development of Epic that I have to talk about before going any further when talking about its music. You see, in July of 2024, just before the release of the Thunder Saga, Jorge announced that he hasn't actually made any money off of the literal millions of streams of the Troy or Cyclops Saga. This was due to issues with the company they released them under, Blair Russell Productions, not paying him royalties. So he decided to pull a Taylor Swift and re-recorded the first 2 sagas, with the original cast, under his own company, Winion Entertainment LLC. All this to say, when you stream Epic, be sure to listen to these re-releases, as distinguished by these album covers. This way, you'll be supporting Jorge and the cast. I will be using the updated music for most of this video, however, I will occasionally play parts of the older releases in order to make some comparisons between them. So, with that established, let's begin with the opening song of Epic, The Horse and the Infant. The opening number of a show is, in my opinion, one of the most important. This is your one shot to introduce the audience to the world and characters right off the bat. A good opening number also works to establish the tone, the characters, status quo, and sometimes even what their goal is. There's a fantastic video by Sideways on the importance of an establishing number. He explains all of this in much more depth and with much more technical knowledge than I have, but one major point of his video highlights how strong openers double as an introduction to the world and an I Want song, which is basically the number that tells us what our protagonist's goal and motivation is. It's storytelling 101. The protagonist wants something, obstacles prevent them from having it, thus creating conflict. The rest of the plot moves to help them resolve said conflict. Similar to Beauty and the Beast and the Goofy movie of all films, Epic's opening number does also double as an I Want song. Kind of. The Horse and the Infant is almost like two songs. Not musically, but narratively. The first half serves much more as a traditional opening number, with Odysseus in the Trojan horse addressing his men. They're planning an attack on Troy, and a few things are immediately made clear. Odysseus is in charge of a large group of men. This show features fights and battles as a major plot point, and this line,
Penelope, Penelope, and Telemachus, I fight for us, I fight for us. What do you live for?
outright spells out what Odysseus wants. He wants to go home so he can be with his wife and son. With this, he gives the command to attack, and we hear swords clashing and various battle sounds, until Odysseus cries out in pain, as if he's being struck. But no one is there. The assailant was a vision conjured by a god. And if you know Greek gods, this eagle's cry will tell you exactly who it is. This is the second half of the song, where the introduction is already over and Odysseus is presented with a new conflict. Zeus, played by Luke Holt, informs him that he must kill someone's son, here and now, and Odysseus assures him that he is ready for whatever foe he has to face. And Zeus leads him to a baby. This show does not have visuals, at least not yet, so all of the storytelling has to be done through the music. And before Odysseus even sings the line, "It's just an infant," you may be able to deduce this information because of these notes. They sound like something you'd hear in a nursery, like a children's song. It's a stark contrast to the intense music and heavier instrumentation we've heard up until this point. Suddenly, the sounds of war seem distant as we get much softer singing from Odysseus, asking what danger a baby could pose. After which, Zeus and the intensity return, explaining how this is the son of Hector, who will grow up to swear vengeance on him and his family and kill them all. And immediately, Odysseus' goal is threatened. If he spares this baby, his wife and son will be in danger. He has to make a choice, and he pleads with Zeus for any other way out of this. This is where I'd like to highlight the difference between the older and newer recordings of the first two sagas. Listen as I transition between the two and see how improved the instrumentation and mixing are.
I could raise him as my own, or send him far away from home. Make sure his bastards never know.
The last thing I'd like to touch on musically here is the concept of characters and their main instruments. Jorge is assigned each major character an instrument that is prevalent in their music, and for Odysseus, it's the guitar. If you listen closely, you'll find that the type of guitar playing actually changes based on his emotional state, such as an electric guitar in more intense moments, or a nylon one when he's softer and more contemplative. And if we circle back to the part of the song where he sings Penelope, I think I can actually hear her instrument too, which is the viola.
Penelope, Penelope.
The song ends with the ominous line, "The blood on your hands is something you won't lose. All you can choose is whose." And before we move on to song 2, the last detail I want to highlight is at the beginning of this song. If you listen closely, you can hear a clock ticking.
Alright, my brothers, listen closely. Tonight we make the Trojans pay.
Remember this, we're coming back to it later. For all of my praise of this song so far, it's actually in my bottom 5 epic songs that have been released. Yeah, that's how good I think the show is. I don't even think any epic song is bad. The reason The Horse and the Infant is lower in my rankings is just because I think most of the other songs are better. Speaking of, let's move on to... Epic has very few traditional ballads. Most songs in this show serve to advance the plot, Not many of them have the characters just sitting around and singing about their feelings. In opera, this is the difference between recitative and aria, another tidbit that I learned from Sideways. Again, you have to check him out if you're even remotely interested in musicals. But regardless, in Act 1, I can only identify 2 songs in the entire act that are an equivalent to an aria, and Just a Man is one of them. The whole song is just Odysseus holding this baby at the top of a wall as he debates if he can bring himself to kill him. Fun fact, this is a result of adaptation, because in the original mythos, the person who dropped the baby from the wall varies. It's either Odysseus or Neoptolemus. But as he struggles with this choice, he sings one of the most pivotal lines in the entire musical.
When does a man become a monster?
And if you know this show, or you look ahead in the chapter markers, you'll know why it's so important. But despite his apprehension, the music builds as Odysseus holds this infant over the edge of the wall, and we get my personal favorite detail of the song. At the last repetition of Forgive Me, the music drops out.
I'm just a man.
And it's not the only thing that drops, as we know what choice Odysseus has made. One could make an argument that Just a Man is the most important song of the show. I would argue that a later song is more important narratively, but musically? Yeah, without a doubt. Not that I counted, but I'm almost certain that Just a Man has the most musical callbacks in the entire show so far. In fact, to prove it, I'm going to start a Just a Man motif counter in the corner. This will update every time that I notice that this song is referenced, and soon enough, you'll see what I mean. But now that we've got one case of infanticide under our belts, the war is over, and it's time to go home. If you recall the first TikTok Jorge ever posted about Epic, it was a snippet of this song. One can then assume that this was meant to be the opening number of the show. And I think some aspects of that carry over into its final version. We get establishing information, with Odysseus opening the song by singing about the 600 men under his command, and how they're sailing to try and get back home to Ithaca and his family. We also get the introduction of 2 major characters. First is Eurylochus, Odysseus' second-in-command. He is characterized right out of the gate as being logical and realistic, pointing out how they're out of food and asking their captain for the plan. To which Odysseus demonstrates his wit by telling them to follow the birds as they'll lead them in the direction of land. We are then introduced to the other important crewmate, Polites. He's Odysseus' best friend, and we immediately see how he contrasts Eurylochus by spotting an island and commenting that maybe the locals will share their food with him. This trio creates something of an ideological spectrum, with Polites' somewhat blind optimism, and Eurylochus' more ruthless ideology as he suggests attacking first and raiding the island instead. For now, Odysseus falls somewhere between them, agreeing to scope out the island first with Polites to attempt to do this peacefully, but he also immediately assures Eurylochus that if they aren't back by morning, he can burn the place to the ground. In my opinion, Full Speed Ahead is one of the most underrated songs in Epic. The instrumentation is one of my personal favorites. It's catchy as all hell, and a prime example of the use of sound effects in Epic, such as the crashing waves in this song, or rainfall and thunder and others. It really adds to the immersion and sense of atmosphere when listening to the show. Full Speed Ahead also just has this grand feeling of exploration that's hard for me to articulate, but it really makes the song one of my personal favorites. Top 5, dare I say it. Which is why I colloquially refer to this song as the right-hand man of Epic. To explain what the hell I'm talking about, Right-Hand Man is a song from Hamilton. It serves as the introduction to George Washington, the beginning of his partnership with Hamilton, while further planting the seeds of resentment with Burr. And it's a fantastic number. But when you hear people talk about Hamilton, how many of them say that this is one of their favorites? Or even talk about it that much at all? Yeah, that's what I thought. As such, I use the term right-hand man effect to describe a song from a musical that I personally think is one of the show's best, but is heavily underrated by the general fan base. If I ever talk about another musical like this, I will point out that show's example of the right-hand man effect too. But for now, we have an island to explore. Open Arms is, in contrast to the type of music we've heard up to this point, a much lighter song. It's Polites and Odysseus walking around the island as his best buddy tries to cheer him up because he's feeling guilty about that baby he just murdered. The song is musically pretty different than what we've heard so far. It's far lighter with a more playful tone, and we see that Polites' instruments reflect this, Jorge specifically mentioning the marimba and kalimba. In the middle of his cheering up speech, though, they're interrupted by lotus eaters. Odysseus threatens them while Polites tries to use kindness. The two are offered food, but Odysseus points out that this is lotus, which will control your mind if you eat it. And already we start to see cracks in Polites' belief system. Because if they had eaten the food without question, they'd be screwed. After their refusal, the Lotus Eaters instead point them to a cave where they can find food, and they decide to head off in that direction instead. The Lotus Eater confrontation is one of the funniest moments of the show for me. I love the little... Epic, for all of its drama, can be really funny when it wants to be, and this exchange is one of my favorite examples of it.
If we don't get back safely, my men will turn this place into blazes.
See? This life is amazing when you greet it with open arms.
Open Arms is, in my opinion, the biggest improvement from the older recording to the new one. It's not that Stephen Dookie was ever remotely bad as Polites, but there is, at least to me, an audible improvement in his voice and tone between the first release and this one. I would also be remiss to talk about this song without mentioning what it was originally. That being, well, a completely different song.
Just let me be your light. Let me be the stars you see at night. Let me be the arms that hold you tight. When life gets hard, or when you're lost in the dark, let me be your light.
This is Your Light, the original Polites song. It's a beautiful ballad from him to Odysseus, and even though I think cutting it was undoubtedly the right choice, if Jorge ever releases versions of the cut songs, like he's expressed interest in doing, this one is going to destroy me emotionally. But what makes Open Arms better? For me, that comes down to the way it explores Polites as a character. Your Light is nice, but the main message boils down to, I'm here for you, bro, no matter what. And as sweet as that sentiment is, let's compare it to Open Arms, where he expresses that his main philosophy is about greeting the world with kindness and, for lack of a better term, open arms. This is one extreme end of the ideologies presented in the show, and these ideologies and where Odysseus falls on their spectrum is literally the theme of the entire musical. It's a much stronger choice to characterize Polites this way, and by the end of the song, everything seems like it might just turn out alright after all. Ha! You fool! You thought Odysseus could catch a break in this show? Think again. Because all of a sudden, he's transported to this sort of pocket dimension, and greeted by the one and only Athena, goddess of wisdom. This ability of hers is referred to as quick thought, and it's musically indicated by an increase in beats per minute, as well as a clock ticking sound. Remember when I told you to put a pin in that sound effect during The Horse and the Infant? That was actually foreshadowing, showing that Athena was always watching over Odysseus. Athena also has this musical motif to her that's played on the piano, which is her main instrument. It's this sort of trilling set of notes, and you hear it at the opening of the song here. Anyway, Athena is currently chastising Odysseus for almost actually considering Polites' philosophy, and we get a flashback song about the pair and how they came to work together like this. Athena was looking for someone to train in her ways, a warrior of the mind, so to speak. In order to scope out potential candidates, she had a magical boar, seemingly referring to a story in the Odyssey, in which Odysseus goes hunting with his grandfather and gets a scar from a boar, that later allows his nurse to identify him when he returns to Ithaca in disguise at the end of his journey. This section is likely why the original title of the song was The Boy and the Boar. So, a young Odysseus is the one who ends up slaying her boar, and in the aforementioned cut song Your Light, the lyrics actually state that he did this to protect Polites, throwing himself between them when Polites froze up in fear, and killing it to save his life. God. But Athena sees this and decides to pay the young man a visit. Odysseus claims that he can see her despite her disguise, tricking her into revealing herself. Impressed, she banters with him a little before he reveals that he knows exactly who she is, and we get that trending TikTok sound I was talking about earlier.
You are Athena! Athena!
She agrees to mentor him, and the two form a relationship that a young Odie describes as
Goddess and man, bestest of friends.
We'll see where it ends.
Tegan Early gives an incredible performance as Athena. Her voice carries the power you'd expect from a goddess, but also has the wisdom and grace you'd expect from her as well. I'll touch more on how good her performance is in a later song, but God, it's so awesome, you guys. And with one last warning not to forget his training, Athena ends Quick Thought and the Troy Saga comes to a close. The Troy Saga is a pretty great introduction to the show. It sets the tone, sets the stage for some of the major themes, and introduces us to most of the major characters for this act. But there's no time to rest, because Odysseus and crew set sail for the cave, and we transition into Chapter 4, The Cyclops Saga. There doesn't seem to be much to say in regards to the release of the Cyclops Saga. The first recording came out on January 27th, 2023, only a month after the Troy Saga, and we pick up right where it left off, with song number 6. We open with ominous cave sounds and sheep bleating as an arrow is fired, killing one. Polites is all like, "Wow guys, there's so much food here, isn't this so great?" And even resident skeptic Eurylochus is like, "Yeah, this is pretty great, good job guys. It's all so nice. I sure hope nothing goes terribly wrong." So, meet Polyphemus, the titular Cyclops of the saga. And he is not happy that Odysseus and co. just murdered his favorite sheep. He says that he's going to kill them, and Odysseus desperately tries to reason with him. He offers Polyphemus some of his wine if he lets them live, and he drinks it, thanking Odysseus and asking his name, to which he answers it's nobody, just like in the original story. But the peace is shattered when Polyphemus says that his reward for the wine is that he will be the last of his men to die, as he attacks the group, and without a single moment to breathe, we move into the next song. But before we go there, I'll discuss why I think the song works as well as it does. First of all, as you've heard, there's a voice effect over the Cyclops that I personally think makes his entrance so chilling. His character instruments are the cello and the synth. And another detail that I want to point out is that Polyphemus is actually voiced by Jorge as well. So he's basically having this conversation with, well, himself. But despite that, it's so tense. When it comes down to it, the song is just two people talking, but you are on the edge of your seat the entire time. That's where I think Polyphemus succeeds as a song. The suspense. But all of that tension is shattered at the end of the song, and despite Odysseus' efforts, it's time for a boss battle. I wasn't exaggerating when I described the song as a boss battle, because that's literally how Jorge describes it too. His anime and video game inspiration is seen full force here, and the instrumentals absolutely nail the intense feeling he's going for. You can hear the ensemble chanting Polyphemus' name in the background, and that's not even mentioning Jorge's vocals here. Just listen to this. Odysseus and his men, under his leadership, seem to be winning the fight. Polyphemus retreats into the darkness, but then...
Captain.
Yeah. In an absolutely brutal fashion, Polites is killed right before Odysseus' eyes. You can hear the squish with each impact in the new recording too, and just... God, this gives me the chills every time as Polyphemus clubs down a few more of his men. The pain in Polites' final rasp of Captain, the screams of the victims, it's all so well done. I especially want to highlight how good of a character Polites was. This man was alive for a total of 7 songs. That's not even a fifth of the entire show. And yet, it feels like I actually knew him, what he was about, and why he was important to Odysseus. So, when he dies, it hurts. A lot. All this to say, Polites and this scene are both great. Even if Jorge deceived the entire fandom by posting this clip before the saga release.
But Captain, what'll we do with our fallen friends?
Liar. You absolute liar.
Ricky, when I catch you, Ricky. Ricky, when I catch you, Ricky.
Anyway, not playing around anymore, Polyphemus sings the chorus that Odysseus was using to rally his men back to him as he slaughters them. It almost seems like the end, but all of a sudden his words slur as he collapses, leaving us to sit with what just happened as the next song begins, appropriately titled This song begins with a sort of ringing sound from Odysseus' perspective, as he, reasonably, is a little out of it after the events of the last song. Eurylochus snaps him back to reality, and Odysseus explains that the reason Polyphemus passed out was because he slipped some lotus into the wine he offered him earlier. He swears that they won't die here, to which Eurylochus, not Polites, asks what they'll do about the people who died. And Odysseus says they'll, well, remember them. He instructs his men to sharpen the club into a spear so that they can drive it into his eye, blinding him, since killing him would trap them inside the cave. They stab his eye as planned, and suddenly, more Cyclops show up to ask why Polyphemus is wailing in agony. They ask who hurt him, to which he answers it was As such, they all tell him to shut up as they leave, allowing Odysseus and his crew to snatch the sheep and escape back to the ship. Gee, that whole nobody scheme was such a clever move. I sure hope Odysseus doesn't make impulsive and detrimental decisions that will render it pointless a few minutes later. Athena suddenly appears again in quick thought, telling him, hey, what are you doing? The Cyclops is still a danger to you as long as he's alive, and you should finish the job. To which Odysseus says,
No.
No?
He says blinding him is enough. He's going to show mercy, and despite Athena's warning, he breaks out of quick thought in order to call out to the Cyclops, declaring that he should remember both the people he's killed and the men that led them, revealing himself as Odysseus, king of Ithaca, as they sail away. And the Cyclops gives an ominous smile. Polites may be dead, but we see how he will continue to haunt the narrative. It's likely the pain of his death and the knowledge of his philosophy that leads to Odysseus choosing to spare the Cyclops. And I've heard some people say that all of the suffering that follows is indirectly because of Polites and Odysseus choosing to honor his mindset. And I'm sorry, but no. While I do think there is merit to not greeting every situation with mercy and compassion, in this specific case, it wasn't sparing the Cyclops that doomed Odysseus. It was the fact that he chose to taunt him and reveal his true name to him. And I would argue that he made that decision not out of compassion or mercy, but out of grief and anger, especially in the re-recording, which changes the more triumphant cry of his name to a more enraged one.
Odysseus! Odysseus!
So yeah, free my boy, Polites did nothing wrong. The song has really grown on me. It wasn't my favorite in the overall show for a while, but I think I've learned to appreciate it a lot more with time, particularly the second half. But I need to take a deep breath, because we're about to talk about the final song of this saga. Well, 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 if it isn't the consequences of his actions. This song has gone through a couple of concepts. It was once a very direct reprise of Warrior of the Mind.
I can't stand by and watch you tear down the walls of all I have taught you. Until now I thought I was the answer. If not, then this is my goodbye.
Or a song called This Is the Way, which was cut because it didn't fit the vibe that Jorge was going for this serious scene. And
I make you right. The world is insincere. This cannot be. This is the way. This cannot be. This is the way. This cannot be. This is the way.
yeah, he was right. So let's take a look at what we did end up with. Odysseus is pulled into Athena's realm again, where she scolds him for his disobedience. She delivers some biting insults, even digging at his dead friends, as she tells him that she's done with him. But Odysseus is not taking this lying down, and he actually talks back to her. He argues that, as a goddess, she cannot possibly understand what it's like to lose someone or to care when people die. He even goes as far as to say that he saw her as a friend, but agrees that it's over between them. She then snaps at him that she never asked for a friend, calling her mentorship of him a waste of time. And with just as much venom back, Odysseus says that at least he has people he's fighting for, while she only cares about the glory that she would receive from her perfect warrior. And we see evidence of this because of how Athena has spoken to him in the entire show so far. Unlike Zeus in The Horse and the Infant, who used Penelope and Telemachus to appeal to Odysseus in order to get him to drop the baby off the wall, Athena doesn't. In fact, she never uses any of Odysseus's personal connections to sway him. She uses herself and her opinion, because that's what's most important to her. Odysseus should be obeying her because she said so. She wants all the credit for it. And Odysseus is finally calling her out on it, that she is only fighting for herself and for the glory that Odysseus can bring her by being her pupil, which she stated is a reason why she wanted to create her Warrior of the Mind in the first place, to make people follow her. He throws her title right back in her face, asking,
Since you claim you're so much wiser, why's your life spent all alone? You're alone!
and this hurts Athena. She goes quiet, and she soon yells at him again after this, but the silence is deafening. She says that maybe one day he'll understand, but not today, because, well...
For after all your
The following Sever Your Own headline, I believe, is a clever reference to Perseus beheading Medusa, and Athena confirms that this is her goodbye, giving one last guttural scream of it before she's gone. While I don't think Athena's departure is quite as impactful as Polites' death, I do think that this song is a masterful argument between her and Odysseus. Warrior of the Mind did a strong enough job establishing their dynamic that it does hurt to see it fall apart. But the strength of the song for me is more in the lyrics than the context. They do not hold back, tearing into each other. And even if you listen to this song without knowing anything about the story or characters, you can know the weight and the impact of what was just said. I'm just gonna come out with it. This is currently my favorite song in Epic. I won't even argue it's objectively the best one, even though I do think you could make that argument. But this was the song that well and truly got me sucked this deep into the musical. The emotion, the biting lyrics, the instrumentation, all of it comes together in something that hit me so deeply, and I still have not fully recovered. And don't even get me started on the new recording. Tegan tore me apart in the older recording with her performance, but the new one eviscerated me. She adds these growls, this slight shake to her voice after Odysseus wounds her, and the way you can hear the hurt in her voice despite the anger, I cannot properly articulate it. And as the song, along with Athena's presence, fades out, we have no choice but to press on without her, right into Chapter 5, The Ocean Saga. The Ocean Saga marks, to this day, the longest hiatus we've ever had between sagas. With the Cyclops Saga releasing in January 2023, we did not get the Ocean Saga until December of that year. Its release pays homage to the Troy Saga, coming out on Christmas Day. We didn't know why at the time it took so long, but I now speculate that the gap was because of the aforementioned conflict with their old recording studio. Regardless, we finally got it, and this saga does not disappoint. So let's start it off with Song 10. We go from one unfortunate situation to another, it seems, because Odysseus and his fleet get caught up in an unrelenting storm that halts all of their progress to Ithaca. I wonder who could have caused this. Spoiler alert, if you know who has the brass character instrument, you can figure it out. But regardless, Odysseus locks in and commands his ships on how to avoid being capsized, telling them to avoid the waves and follow the lead of his ship. Eurylochus, ever the pessimist, keeps saying how there's no way they're going to survive, until suddenly, they all spot a floating island. Now, in reality, a floating island just means an island that literally floats, not touching the bottom of the ocean floor. But in Epic, Jorge thought the term meant a literal floating island, like in the sky. And thus, that's what we have in the musical now. But how are they gonna get up there? Odysseus tells his crew to all grab harpoons. He tells them to fire the harpoons at the island, giving him a way to climb up there. And Eurylochus has the appropriate reaction of, "What?" When we were getting teasers for the Ocean Saga, this one wasn't exactly my favorite song. I still think it's the weakest song in the saga, but my opinion of it did increase a lot when I actually heard the full thing. I think the biggest issue with Storm is just not a ton happens in it. It's more of a transitional song between the end of the last saga and the meat of this one. And while, yes, you could argue Full Speed Ahead is similar to this song, as I said before, that one introduces some of the main characters and their ideologies. It just has more to it, in my opinion. But again, not a bad song by any means. And it's only up from here in this saga, because next is... It's finally time for Eurylochus to have a major number. He confronts Odysseus about this, frankly, kind of batshit insane plan, saying that one wrong step and he's going to piss off the wind god, who lives at the top of this island. Odysseus tells him to chill out and that it'll be fine, but Eurylochus is not convinced. He asks Odysseus how long his luck is going to last, because people are dying. Here, we see another example of Polites' lingering influence in Odysseus' response.
I still believe in goodness. I still believe that we could be kind. on the heart and see what starts.
When asked why he's so skeptical about this, Eurylochus says he just doesn't want anyone else to die, and that Odysseus is like a brother to him. He continues to question his methods, though, so Odysseus assures everyone,
"Our journey is almost done."
Before he pulls Eurylochus aside and essentially tells him to shut up because spreading doubt and uncertainty amongst the crew is going to destroy them. And after a moment, Eurylochus concedes. You know how Open Arms was the big Polites number? This is the same thing for Eurylochus, all the way down to it being him singing his philosophy to Odysseus in an attempt to give advice. Whereas Polites had those lighter instruments, Eurylochus's character instrument, interestingly, isn't a physical instrument at all. It's the ensemble. This is because Eurylochus is something of a figurehead for the rest of the crew, so their vocals are often seen accompanying him. We saw this all the way back in Full Speed Ahead,
Captain Eurylochus.
And we see it here too to create some absolutely beautiful harmonies.
You rely on wit and people die on it. Whoa.
I also have to talk about Armando Julian's performance as Eurylochus. He has this deep, powerful voice that I could listen to for hours. I love it so much. This number demonstrates that Odysseus is still trying to toe the line between the open arms mindset while still being clever and doing what needs to be done. We also see how Eurylochus's loyalty is being put into question, despite how it seems to be resolved by the end of the number. I want to talk more about the lasting effects of this song on the show, but we aren't at the most prevalent example of that yet. So for now, we have a wind god to talk to in... Not even 2 seconds into the song, and you can already identify Aeolus's instrument. It's winds, obviously. But more specifically, it's the flute. It starts with this beautiful little melody before Odysseus pleads with the god to use the winds and guide them through the storm so they can finally get home. And we are properly introduced to Aeolus, goddess of wind, played by Kira Stone. And just listen to her voice.
Ha ha ha, I am the wind, twisting and turning.
It gives this sort of playful charm to the goddess, and I am obsessed with it. Her backup singers are these little creatures called Winions. I don't know why I love that so much, but I do. Jorge, I am begging you to re-release the Winion merch. I need one of these little guys. Tangent aside, Aeolus strikes a deal with Odysseus. She puts the entire storm in this little bag and tells him that all he has to do is keep it closed and they can sail back to Ithaca with no problems. But obviously, this is easier said than done. Shout out to this line.
Sometimes killing is a must.
What?
With the bet in place, Odysseus climbs back down to the ship, where the crew immediately asks, "What's in the bag?" Before he can answer, some stray Winions go,
It's treasure.
and I can't even see his face, but I know Odysseus was giving the darkest possible glare at that moment. Odysseus tells them, point blank, that this is not treasure, it is the storm, so the bag cannot be opened under any circumstances. And this dumbass crew just goes,
We'll try.
The chorus kicks in again, and the crew is in a state of unrest over not knowing what's in the bag. They then drop this absolutely foul line.
Everything's changed since Polites.
But 9 whole days go by without incident, because Odysseus is forcing himself to stay awake to guard the bag. However, the lack of sleep gets to him as he starts to picture Penelope and Telemachus, and man, something about this verse is just heartbreaking. He wants to get home so badly, proclaiming,
So much has changed, but I'm the same. Yes, I'm the same. Just keep it.
and Dream Penelope tells him to wake up, because, predictably, the moment he dozes off, someone opens the bag. And they were right off the coast of Ithaca! God! This releases the storm, calling back to the song as they go full speed ahead. Aeolus shows up and says they're off to the land of the giants, and Odysseus enlists the help of Eurylochus to close the bag and save whatever wind is left inside in case they ever need it. This is another one of those songs that grew on me a lot with time. It is such an earworm, helped by how addictive I find Kira's voice. But the back half really does pack an emotional gut punch, knowing just how close Odysseus was to getting home, only to have it ruined at the last minute. The song ends with the ship suddenly stopping, and we get a very ominous declaration.
Odysseus of Ithaca! Do you know who I am?
And we sure are about to find out. Talk about making an entrance. If you couldn't gather, this is Poseidon, and he is not happy. Because, according to Greek mythology, Cyclops are children of Poseidon, and Odysseus just mutilated one. Oops. Poseidon's instrument is the trumpet, so if you weren't sure who sent that storm 3 songs ago, well, there's your answer. One line that I love here is,
Yes, the pack of wolves is swimming with the shark now!
Shark is obvious because, dangerous water animal, but Odysseus and his crew being described as wolves is a running thing in the show. One of the songs from the Wisdom Saga is about Telemachus, who is referred to as, get this, Little Wolf. God, I love this show. Anyway, Poseidon rips into Odysseus, saying that he made a huge mistake in doxing himself and then letting the Cyclops live, because that let Polyphemus snitch on him by praying to Poseidon. He straight up calls his philosophy hollow, calling him a Greek who reeks of false righteousness. Brutal.
You are far too nice, mercy has a price. It's the final crack, we're about to break the ice now.
Okay, back on track. Poseidon tells Odysseus that the only way to save himself is to apologize for what he did to his son, to which Odysseus gives it his best shot. I've heard some discourse around this scene that Odysseus flubbed the apology and that's why Poseidon doesn't accept it, but I don't think that's the case. I think he was mocking Odysseus. He never had the intention to spare him, because letting him go is what Odysseus' philosophy would have him do, and the entire point of this number is tearing that mindset apart. What follows is one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. Where do I even start with this segment? First of all, the line between naivete and hopefulness is almost invisible. Who writes this? And you know how I said the massacre in the Cyclops Saga was chilling? Yeah, how about the mass drowning of most of Odysseus' crew as they desperately cry out for their captain, and the horrible, chilling silence that follows, along with a direct callback to Just a Man.
When does a ripple become a tidal?
I wish I could listen to this song again for the first time. The number ends with Poseidon asking Odysseus what his last words will be, and in a moment of quick thinking, he opens the wind bag, allowing them to escape. God, this song. I still have so much to say, where do I even... Okay. Steven Rodriguez, voice of Poseidon. And he might have my favorite voice in the entire show as of what's been released. He's definitely up there, because do you hear this growl?
A Greek who reeks of false righteousness, that's what I hate!
I'm ascending. I don't think I'm gonna survive his return in Get in the Water. Poseidon is also another boss battle, although it's hardly even fair to call fights with gods boss battles, since they're less so fights, and more so the gods coming down to just kick their ass. But there's a really cool reference in the opening here to another famous video game boss battle. Listen. Yeah, really cool. I've already covered some of the lyrics, but I specifically want to talk about the titular mindset of ruthlessness. This is the theme of the entire show, as stated by Jorge. epic is about the concept of ruthlessness and Odysseus' journey to become more and more merciless in order to get back home. Because, as Poseidon states, ruthlessness is mercy upon ourselves. Isn't that crazy? The song about the theme of the whole show is first given to the villain. Compare this to other major musicals and the songs that most directly address their overall theme. Hamilton is about our legacy and throwing away our shot, and has My Shot sung by Hamilton, and Who Lives Who Dies Who Tells Your Story sung by his wife Eliza at the end. Cats is about community and second chances, with Memory being sung by Grisabella, who, isn't the protagonist because Cats doesn't have one, but she's clearly meant to be one of the good and sympathetic characters. Lion King has He Lives in You and Circle of Life, led by Rafiki. I'm not claiming that this is something that has never been done before or anything. My point is that it's not usually the norm to have the song that outright states the theme of your show given to the villain. I don't think that's a bad thing, though. If anything, I think it's a very striking aspect of the show to have the message first pushed onto Odysseus by the god who wants to kill him the most. I know I said that My Goodbye was my favorite song in the show, and it is, but God, does ruthlessness give it a run for its money. This is how you do a villain song. Eat your heart out, modern Disney. The wind blows him away from Poseidon, who leaves Odysseus with the very words he said to the Cyclops as they sail away from him. One last ominous threat.
Remember me.
Chapter 6. The Circe Saga. After the release of the Ocean Saga, it was uncertain when we would get the next one. Sure, the turnaround between the first two was fast, but then it took almost a year. There was no real established norm at this point, so I didn't know what to expect. And then, January 11th, we get an announcement. That's right, the Circe Saga would be releasing on Valentine's Day, 2024. I was elated. The wait for the Ocean Saga traumatized me, and I genuinely kind of thought we'd be getting one, maybe two sagas a year. But enough backstory. Let's meet the titular sorceress herself in Song 14. The song immediately starts with this beautiful rendition of a part of Full Speed Ahead, which is by now basically the theme they play to represent exploration or sailing. We also get to hear Circe's character instrument right away, that being a string ensemble. Odysseus and co stop on an island after fleeing from Poseidon, and Eurylochus tries to confess something to Odysseus, which he shuts down. Surely this is unimportant and will never be brought up again. Instead, Odysseus tells him to go scout out the island to make sure it's safe, which he does. But it's not long before Eurylochus comes back, alone and visibly shaken. Odysseus asks what the hell happened, and Eurylochus tells him they found a palace, and inside of it was the most dangerous and powerful foe they've faced yet. Obviously, Odysseus is like, "Oh god, what is it?" And Eurylochus goes,
"A woman."
What?
She had us in just 2 words.
Come inside.
Damn.
This is Circe, played by Talia Sindel. She invites the men inside, offering them food and a place to rest. And because they're tired, lonely men who probably haven't even looked at a woman in ages, they of course accept. Eurylochus, though, ever the skeptic, stays outside and watches. He tells Odysseus that Circe put a spell in the food, and it causes all of the men to turn into pigs. Odysseus tells him that they need to go rescue them, to which Eurylochus says,
"No, we don't!"
Which is really funny when, no, we aren't at the Thunder Saga yet. I have to hold it in. Anyway, he says that they should take the men they still have and get out of there. But Odysseus, still laden with a ton of guilt because of all the death that's been happening, says no, and decides to go by himself to try and save them. All of this is sung in tandem with Circe's lyrics, as she sings about how she's a puppeteer, not a player in these games. It's a solid enough introduction to her character, highlighting the cunning in the way that she tricks the men into eating the food. One line I think is particularly great is,
I've got you, don't worry, Sassy's got you now.
Because of the double meaning. She's saying it to the men like she's going to take care of them, but she means it in the way that she's actually successfully ensnared them. While I don't think the song is bad, I do have to admit it's my least favorite in the show so far. It's the only one I skip sometimes. It just doesn't have anything here that I particularly love like in all the other songs, and I can't quite put my finger on it as to why. My best guess is the length, because most of the other saga openers, which also are usually very exposition heavy and serve to establish the setting of the saga, are either much shorter, like Storm or Polyphemus, or have more of an emotional hook to them, like The Horse and the Infant or The Underworld. I do think it says a lot, though, that this is what I consider to be one of the weakest songs, and I don't even think it's below average. But as Odysseus sets off on his mission, he's about to encounter a new ally in... There's this honestly hilarious little laugh as Odysseus is making his way to Circe's palace. A voice greets him, presenting himself as an ally and offering a little divine intervention, as he puts it. And there's a clever little line here letting you know who it is.
Someone who's not afraid to send a message.
Hermes, the messenger god, played by Troy Doherty. He's definitely characterized as one of the less serious gods, in stark contrast to Zeus, Athena, and Poseidon. His character instrument is what Jorge has dubbed harps and arps, referring to the harp and to electric-plunked synth arpeggios. He tells Odysseus that he's here to help, able to give him the power to take on Circe. Because, let's be real, what chance does Odie have against a full-on minor goddess? Hermes tells him to eat this root that will allow him to momentarily summon any creature of his choice with the power of imagination. Followed by a pretty funny line.
And I call this root Holy Moly.
A common misconception is that Hermes is singing the high notes in the final chorus, but it's actually Odysseus after taking the moly.
Wouldn't you like a taste of the power? Wouldn't you like to use more than words? Deep in the night, the fight lasts for hours. You can be heard, or you can be...
The song ends with Odysseus thanking Hermes, and yeah, okay, this bit is pretty funny.
Don't thank me, friend, you very well may die. Good luck.
Something interesting about the Circe Saga is that it's the only saga up until now that doesn't end with a song featuring a god. Athena in Troy and Cyclops, and Poseidon in Ocean. Instead, the god song is placed here. This is definitely because, compared to Athena, Zeus, and Poseidon, Hermes isn't nearly as big of a character in terms of the overall narrative. In fact, his role was originally just a little cameo in Puppeteer, where he gives Odysseus the moly and leaves. But after seeing that his role in Act 2 was larger, Jorge decided to go back and give him more of a presence in Act 1, and thus this number was made. I do think that's why the song isn't quite as strong as most of the others, because it was originally just gonna be a short little bit, but had to be stretched to an entire number. My biggest issue with this one is the repetition, and that the lyrics aren't quite as strong as other songs, at least for me. It's still very fun though, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't get stuck in my head. A lot. But now that he's as prepared as he'll ever be, it's time to face off against Circe in... This is our next boss battle. Odysseus approaches Circe, asking if she did anything to his men, despite already knowing the answer. The two have some nice little banter, and Circe answers, hilariously,
Who me? All I did was reveal their true form.
You turned them into pigs.
She summons her chimera, telling him she needs to protect her nymphs at all costs, and threatening him to flee. Odysseus confidently says that her magic won't work on him, and she claims he's bluffing as mortals can't find Moly, and again with the great banter.
Who
Hermes gave it to you, didn't he?
Okay, fine, yes. Well, regardless.
With the odds balanced, Odysseus summons his creature, which, interestingly, is a Cyclops. Huh. There's a few reasons I can think of for him to choose this, but the one that I've settled on is it's the most terrifying creature he can think of in the moment. The one that took the life of Polites, and the first time in the show that he properly lost control of a situation. Their monsters fight, and the Cyclops is victorious. Odysseus draws his sword on Circe, who, willing to do anything to protect her nymphs, pulls the last card she has, herself. This number isn't bad, but I don't think it packs the same punch any of the previous boss battles had. First of all, the actual fight is incredibly short. Like, the time between Odysseus summoning the Cyclops and telling Circe that she lost is 20 seconds. This is a far cry from a song like Survive. I get that the point of the climax isn't fully the fight, but also the emotional conflict that happens in the next song, but I don't know, it just doesn't hit nearly as hard for me. I think my biggest issues with the Circe Saga as a whole is that the emotional stakes and narrative strength aren't quite there. Odysseus defeats Circe, yes, but that's kind of it. It's just through brute force, not his cunning like the other times, drugging and blinding Polyphemus or opening the wind bag to escape Poseidon. This isn't inherently a bad thing, I just find it less interesting. I'll elaborate more on my overall thoughts about the saga at the end of it though, because we still have one song left to cover. The music drastically changes here from the intense battle theme to something far more sultry, almost like a tango. Circe tries to seduce Odysseus, calling back to the lyrics of Puppeteer as he tries to hold out against her. Now is the time I'd like to talk about what makes this scene even more interesting out of the show. Because Talia is actually dating Jorge in real life. She's his girlfriend, and yes, they are the cutest couple I've ever seen in my life. It sickens me. They actually met because of Epic. She was cast before they got together. Not to mention, releasing your girlfriend's saga on Valentine's Day? I see you, Jorge, I see you. Either way, it explains why the tension in this scene is just so, chef's kiss. She tempts him, and we hear him falter a bit with another callback to Just a Man.
I'm just a man.
There is no line, never enough, so much power.
As we see her concealing a dagger with the intent to stab him once he gives in to her. This is similar to a song in Hamilton called Say No to This, in which Hamilton is tempted by another woman to cheat on his wife. However, instead of the virgin Hamilton who gives in, our boy Chad Odysseus says, "No, I have a wife, thank you very much." Why did I think this bit was funny? Anyway, he finally tells Circe no, and there's this really beautiful moment here where he refuses her, and we hear, that's the same notes that he sang in The Horse and the Infant, the
Penelope, Penelope.
It shows that he's thinking about her presence being with him without even needing to say it. The way Odysseus talks about his wife, man, when is it my turn? He said it's been 12 years since he's seen her. A miscalculation, actually. One Jorge has acknowledged, and I know he's still kicking himself over. Odysseus tells Circe how they're running from Poseidon, pleading with her to just let them go. And after a moment, she obliges. It seems Odysseus has earned her respect by refusing to cheat on his wife and sleep with her. This ties back into her whole motivation for turning men into pigs in the first place. As back in Done For, she says,
The last time we let strangers live, we faced a heavy loss.
Referring to how men would come and assault her nymphs, so she had to take these measures to protect them and ensure that it never happens again. So it makes sense that his refusal from Odysseus would be what earns him her trust. She tells him there may be one way to avoid Poseidon and make it back home. There's a prophet who could tell them the way. The only issue is, he died. So she offers to send him and his men down to the Underworld in order to find him. And this is my favorite song in the Circe Saga, because the music just soars here at the end. We hear the ensemble come back in as she reverts them back into men, and Talia just kills these vocals.
So much power, but there's no pocket here. No, she's not a bitch, she's a puppeteer. No, she's not a bitch, she's a puppeteer. Yeah.
She really does do a fantastic job as Circe, bringing the wit and charm to her that she's written as having in the show. And with one last declaration that she's not a player, she's a puppeteer, the saga ends. I'd like to elaborate on what I said earlier about the Circe Saga lacking narrative strength. I don't mean this in the sense that I don't think it should have been here. Circe is a huge part of the original epic, and it gives them a way into the underworld. But most of the ideas it presents are things we've already seen up until this point. Odysseus loves and misses his wife and refuses to be unfaithful to her. That's his big choice at the climax of the saga, but he was already willing to kill a baby for her. And later, he will hold the same mindset on Calypso's island. The biggest counterpoint to arguing the importance of the saga narratively is Eurylochus' desire to flee and puppeteer, and Hermes' introduction. And these are both good points, as both of these things are important in Act 2. But I don't know, I think the fact that the climax hinges around something that's already been well established and will be established again in the future is what makes it weaker for me. There was no big moment, no point that just took my breath away like the other sagas did. That's why, for all of my talk of how it's impossible for me to rank epic, I am confident in saying this is my least favorite saga. I know it sounds like I'm ripping the saga apart a little, but I don't believe it's bad. It's just less good. But we are in for a treat now, because Act 1 closes with Chapter 7, The Underworld Saga. After the Circe Saga dropped, call me a skeptic, but I still wasn't fully sure when we'd get the next one. Because you gotta remember, the Troy and Cyclops sagas also released very close together before we had that almost year-long hiatus. So I was thinking maybe we'd get 2 every winter or something.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Everybody stay calm!
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
The Underworld Saga is the shortest saga in the show, the only one to consist of just 3 songs. It released on April 26, 2024, keeping up with the bi-monthly saga pattern we've had for the last 3 now. This is also the final saga in Act 1, and it opens with Odysseus tells his crew that the underworld is a confusing realm, and they need to stay focused and find the prophet. We then get these incredibly eerie sounds that play throughout this number, the wails of the spirits as Odysseus sings the chorus, admitting that the screams of the dead are haunting him, and that in the underworld, you are confronted with your past. And we see the first example of this as a chorus of men cry out for their captain, just like in Ruthlessness, asking why he spared the Cyclops. Why did he do it?
When does a man become a monster?
But there's something odd here. The lyric is
558 men who died under your command.
But if we recall back to Ruthlessness, after drowning most of his fleet, Poseidon says
43 left under your command.
That means, between the events of Ruthlessness and this song, one other person must have died. But we didn't hear anything about that. So what happened? Alright, to fully explain this Easter egg, we need to talk about some cut content. The first song I'm going to go over is called Comfort Zone. We are introduced to a character called Paramedes, a member of Odysseus' crew. He has a short conversation with another soldier named Elpenor, and just listen to this.
Oh please, give me that baby and I'd eat it off a tower.
What?
I don't love anybody, that's my power.
The song is so unserious, I swear. And the TikTok Jorge posted is not helping. The extra death number is, in fact, a reference to Elpenor, and a cut verse from the song reveals exactly what happened to him.
I died and nobody noticed. I died and nobody cared. Elpenor, how did this happen? When did you meet your despair? I drank wine from a chalice on top of Circe's palace and fell and broke my neck in shame. But what do you care? So many deaths happen under your reign.
This is the true tragedy of Elpenor, who was not only cut from the main numbers, but even his cameo. Rest in peace, King. Speaking of cut songs, let's talk about Ismarus. This cut song takes place all the way back in the Troy Saga, as Odysseus and his crew decide to raid Ismarus for food and other supplies. This song had Athena serving as a narrator, giving little bits of intel on the main characters, like in Full Speed Ahead. We also get a line from Polites that would eventually blossom into his entire philosophy with,
"The war is over, let's do no harm. Let's find a place with open arms."
Anyway, the long and short of it is that Odi tells Eurylochus not to use any lethal force on the people of Ismarus, and we see Odysseus up late at night. Polites comes and asks him,
"What keeps you up so late at night, my friend?"
All I hear are screams. Every time I dare to close my eyes, I no longer dream. Only nightmares of those who've died.
Yeah, that's the chorus. Originally written all the way back at the start. I'm such a sucker for finding stuff like that. How, despite the song being cut, different elements of it survived across the show. Back in the final release, Odysseus confesses that he cannot stop thinking about the baby he killed at the start of the show, but this spiral is cut off by a familiar voice.
This life is amazing.
When I tell you this gutted me originally, Jorge said that the words the spirits say in the underworld are their last thoughts before they died, which means that even as he was rasping and crushed, Polites wanted Odysseus to keep greeting the world with open arms. God. But if you thought one emotional gut punch wasn't enough, we get a voice that the audience won't recognize, but Odysseus clearly does.
That voice. It can't be. Mom?
Oh God, okay. So, this is Odysseus' mother, who died waiting for her son to come back home. The duet here is just heart-shattering, as Odysseus realizes he took too long and now it's too late. And one last little bit of trivia for you. Odysseus' mother is played by WolfyTheWitch. Yes, Jorge's mom. And just when I thought I was done crying. He has no choice but to leave his mother and all of the dead behind as they keep sailing. And the key change here on the final chorus is incredible listen time. This song is so freaking good. It delivers on a lot of the emotional buildup and guilt that Odysseus has from the events of this act. And while I don't think the song is as underrated as something like Full Speed Ahead, I do think it deserves a little more love. I would go as far as to say it's my favorite in the Underworld Saga. And that's saying a lot considering what I have to say about this saga at the end of the section. Alright, we did it. We found the famous blind prophet, Tiresias, played by Mason Olszewski. His instrument is the electric synth and strings. He tells Odysseus that, yeah, he sees a future where he helps him go home. But it's not this one. LOL. He sees a song of past romance. I see the sacrifice of man. Sorry. Despite being surprisingly difficult for me to sing, this is one of my favorites to belt too. But he gives them the prophecy, with the chilling conclusion that a man will make it back to Ithaca, but it's no longer him. Obviously, Odysseus is none too happy about this. They suffered and sailed through the toughest of hells. Now you tell us our efforts for nothing. Okay, sorry, that was the last one. Tiresias has this bad little habit of not answering questions directly, just going on that his palace will be painted red, and he sees his wife with a haunting figure with a trail of bodies behind him. And at the mere mention of Penelope being with another person, Odysseus snaps, "Boo!" And as much as I love this moment, I do have to bring up the stupid little joke Jorge made that has now become a fandom staple. Odysseus the owl.
Boo! I see a song of past romance.
But again, Tiresias avoids directly answering him. Even if I can picture his exhausted expression because this dense doesn't realize it's him. He just repeats the chorus, and I finally get to talk about how heavenly I think Mason's voice is. Listen to this tone.
I see a man who gets to make it all alive.
Not to mention the instrumentation that follows on that final U. Soaring and intense, and I can just see the devastation on Odysseus' face. Another thing I want to highlight is the chanting in the final chorus. Listen to the background vocals here. We weren't sure what they said, but since release, we found it's a chant of... And these are prophecies. I won't talk about their events here, but even in the background of his song, Tiresias is predicting the future. This song is a personal favorite of mine. I wouldn't argue it's underrated like some of my other faves, though. Sometimes a song just appeals to you personally. But with his message delivered, Odysseus has no choice but to reflect on this. And he does so in the final song of Act 1, Song 20.
I am the monster, rah rah rah. I am the monster, rah rah rah. I am the monster, I am the monster, I am the monster, rah rah rah.
Okay, Jorge's April Fool's Day prank aside, I cannot talk about Monster without first going over some backstory. Hey, you remember how I was talking about Elpenor and Paramedes a couple songs ago? There's actually one more cut song with them that's relevant here. It takes place at the island of the Lotus Eaters after Paramedes eats one. Elpenor argues that this is the happiest he's ever been and they should just leave him there. Odysseus refuses, saying,
Maybe I'm a monster. Maybe I'm in the wrong. Maybe I'm the problem that's been hiding all along.
That makes 2 songs now, whose choruses came from cut Troy Saga songs. Fascinating. Another cut song from the show is titled Man of the House, and this was originally the Act 1 finale. It basically gives us Odysseus' backstory, how his father lost his mind when he was very young, and making Odysseus king of Ithaca at only 13. He talks about when he had to choose a wife, and how he wanted the clever Penelope.
She was the first thing I had an affinity for. She's what I saved my virginity for.
Jesus, Odie, TMI, man. But anyway, the song was eventually cut and replaced with Monster. So, with all of its history out of the way, let's finally talk about the closer we actually got. This is the only other aria besides Just a Man in Act 1. And yeah, it's magnificent. Odysseus reflects on everything he's been told, how there seems to be no hope, but he isn't giving up. He just contemplates if the thing holding them back was himself. He thinks back to all of their foes. The Cyclops, Poseidon, Circe, even himself in the Trojan War. He needs to embrace their mindset in order to finally get home. He's lost too much already. He even echoes Poseidon's words that,
Oh, ruthlessness is mercy upon ourselves.
And there's this beautiful build before it crescendos into the chorus, a loud declaration that,
Then I'll become the monster.
He sings out the names of Penelope and Telemachus, strengthening his resolve to repeat that ruthlessness is indeed mercy. Musically, this number doesn't do as much for me as the other two in the saga, but it does not slack on lyrics. There's a really good line in this song, "I'm the only one whose line I haven't crossed." And it's true. At every opportunity, Odysseus has done what he wanted to do, what he thought was right, and it's caused a lot of problems for them. Maybe he needs to put his own way aside. Maybe he needs to kill to save more lives. This is such a good contradiction, and I love the depth that this song has to it. It's putting his ideals to the test, and for the first time, Odysseus stops trying to be a man. He is ready to be a monster. Most Act 1 finales end with some sort of big declaration or decision. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cliffhanger, but it should hook the audience enough that they want to come back after intermission to see the rest. In Hamilton, this is non-stop, which sets up most of the plot and conflict of the second act. In Phantom of the Opera, it's Christine and Raoul confessing their love for each other as the Phantom swears jealous vengeance. In Wicked, it's Elphaba deciding to break free of Oz's expectations and be free, a real turning point for her character. And Epic's finale here is no exception, summarizing all of the tribulations he's been through so far, as Odysseus fully embraces his transformation from a man into a monster. Despite being only 3 songs, there's a strong case for the Underworld Saga being the best one. It perfectly ties up the events of the first half, with Odysseus confronting the literal ghosts of his past, and after the prophecy fails him, choosing to take matters into his own hands, becoming the monster in order to ensure he gets home, no matter what it takes. Conclusion: the Intermission Saga. And with the end of Act 1, so too do we reach the end of this video. Due to the nature of Epic's release, the rest of the concept album isn't out yet. As such, I've decided to split this into 2 parts, covering Act 1 and Act 2 respectively. At the time of writing, the Thunder and Wisdom sagas have also been released, and trust me, we will get there when we get there. I didn't even talk about the danger motif yet. I have just as much to say about Act 2 so far as I do Act 1, which is saying a lot, considering this script is as long as an undergraduate dissertation. Oh my god, this video is longer than Act 1. I have issues. As much as I doubt it'll happen, if anyone on the Epic team happens to see this, I just want to thank you all. I'll save my big, sappy, emotional speech for the end of Part 2, but you've contributed to something that has given me so much joy and excitement, and inspired me as a creator in ways I cannot even begin to describe. I hope that whenever this video's Part 2 comes out, I'll have even more to talk about and praise. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. This is undoubtedly the longest video I've made so far, so I really appreciate you sticking around. I also know this is not remotely close to my usual brand of content, but yes, musical theater is another passion of mine. So thanks a lot for giving it a chance. Finally, I'd like to thank my friend Maddiinosaur, the artist behind this amazing thumbnail. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments, and if you liked this, please share it. I worked really hard on this one. And I think I finally rambled enough about this show to hold me over for a while. So, with that, I'll see you all next time.